to the Future of Work webinar series organized by the Center for Asia Leadership with our partner, Links International, who is working with us to bring you this episode. My name is Faustino John Lim, and today's webinar is on working from home, flexible strategies for productivity and culture, with our speakers, Daria Estrate and Alex Cater. If you are joining us for the first time, our center is an organization based out of Boston, United States, and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, operating in several cities across Asia. We are founded at Harvard University among fellows and alumni, and we are focused on helping leaders in Asia initiate change and manage progress in their organizations and communities. We are in the midst of a webinar series on the future of work, and the purpose of these webinars is to encourage and educate during these uncertain times. Our partner for this webinar episode is Links International, voted Asia's best HR outsourcing partner for consecutive years. Links is also recognized as Asia's leading HR service provider, delivering 100% in-country services in the APAC region as well as in Southeast Asia. So I'm pleased to welcome over 270 registrants from 20 countries representing several industries. Wherever you guys are, I hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we really do hope that we can be a source of encouragement and of learning for you guys today. Now, I'd like to introduce our speakers. So joining us from San Francisco, Daria Estrate is a strategist of Genentech, a biotechnology company under Roche, which is based out of Silicon Valley. She holds an MBA from Harvard Business School, and she is also the co-author and contributor of our upcoming book, Work of the Future, Rethinking Asia 7. Joining us from Songdo, Incheon, just near Seoul in South Korea. I'm not sure where you're originally from. Maybe you can tell us that. I forgot about that, Alex. But he is founder and principal of the Cater Investment Group. He is a former consultant at A.T. Kearney and Booz Allen Hamilton with over a decade of experience in operational management and finance. He also holds an MBA from Wharton Business School. So thank you guys so much for joining two different parts of the world. How are you guys doing? Daria, maybe we can start with you. How's it? What's the weather like? The things in San Francisco?
I'm good. Thank you, John, and hello, everyone. So happy to and excited to be with you here today. You know, I'm based out of San Francisco, and we're dealing with the coronavirus. But on top of that, we also have the wildfires at that time of the year. So the air is extremely polluted, and now we have to wear double masks.
Wow.
But other than that, we're trying to stay safe. Thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you, Daria. Alex, thank you so much for joining us and for giving your time for us today. How long have you been in Korea, by the way, and where are you originally from?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. I'm originally from Chicago,
okay,
in the U.S. And spent all my time there up until coming to Asia. So I've been in Asia for 5 years, initially in Seoul, in the city. And then for the last 2 years, we moved out to Songdo, which is nearby, one of the satellite cities of Seoul.
I see.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it's great to be with you both. And just looking really forward to the presentation today and the discussion. Now, before I give you guys the floor, I just have some reminders for our audience. So we encourage you to share your questions in the Q&A button. Please just fire them off in the Q&A tab. And if there's a question that resonates with you, please do upvote it. If you have any comments or insights, please shoot them in the chat box, okay? And you can find the two buttons just on the bottom of your screen. Secondly, we will be sharing a recording of the webinar and also a copy of the presentation materials to all participants via email. As we are running this webinar live, we apologize in advance if there might be technical issues. For some reason, my computer is beeping. I'm not sure why. Sorry about that. But from time to time, so we do apologize in advance if that happens. And please make the most of this webinar, learn and enjoy. Okay, so In the next 60 minutes, we'll just get right into the interview with Daria, then also with Alex. After that, we will have an open forum, and then we'll just wrap up, and then we'll have our post-webinar survey at the end. Okay, so let's get right into it with Daria. So she has actually written a chapter in our recent book called The Future is Here, The Move Towards Work from Home and Other Flexible Policies. So Daria, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, John. Thanks everyone for the opportunity to discuss work from home and the move towards a virtual environment. I think each one of us, whether we live in San Francisco or Asia or Europe, we are dealing with this kind of stuff right now to various degrees. So I'm gonna share some of my learnings, just going through this firsthand, and then also doing based on my research for the book. But I would love to hear from each one of you based on your various experiences. That would be great. So first, I'm going to start with some lessons from COVID-19. And these, again, are based on my own experience, but also on my research and also talking to many of you, which has been a very interesting experience for me. So the first one here is work from home is here to stay. And when I say that, it's not necessarily work from home the way we know it now. I think that concept, apart from the fact that it means different things for each one of us right now, but also it's not a static concept. It's evolving with time. We learn more, we tend to do things differently, and it's evolving. However, just the concept of a more flexible work policy moving forward, that's here to stay. Even during COVID-19 and hopefully once we find a vaccine, but it's gonna continue to exist in various forms. So what does that mean for us? And what does it mean from a business perspective? That's my second point here, that business as usual is not an option anymore. And I know you guys are coming from very different, like various backgrounds in the public sector, in the private sector, in small companies, in big companies. But I think irrespective of that, and also in like different industries, usually it's always easier to just continue the way we've been doing things up to now, to just not change things and try to to maintain things constant. However, because everything around us is changing, that's not an option anymore. So it's better to try to evolve with it and try to embrace it. And also even, and that brings me to my third point here, even embrace it as an opportunity to rethink how we conduct business. Do we have an option to stay the way we are right now? Probably yes, but that's not going to be successful in the long term. So it's just better, even if it's disruptive, even if it comes with its challenges, and it's not always easy to go through this process of change, but it's better to embrace it and just to think creatively in terms of what works for each one of us. And we'll cover in the later slides some of the things that we can do right now to start rethinking the way we're doing business. But I think my overall message here is that it's time for change. And on the next slide here, what I wanted to share with you is a quote from one of my favorite CEOs of all time, Jack Welch. And what he's trying to say here with the fact that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it's like years in the making, and you've got to get up every day with a new idea, a new spin, and you've got to bring it to work every day, is that, so at least what happened here in the Silicon Valley, once we got hit with the coronavirus in the March timeframe, everyone was understandably scared. Everyone was scrambling to see how are we going to continue to do our work. And people went to various extremes. But what we realized for the past 6 months now is that whatever we're dealing with, it's here. It's going to be here for a long period of time. So it's important to consider this as a long duration process and try to adapt and try to evolve with it. But it's not going to happen overnight. So I think setting the right expectations is also very important in this process of change. And if we move to the next slide, so I also wanted to, I wanted to find some examples from Asia that some of you may be more familiar with. And I'm gonna draw the parallel with what's happening in California and across the US right now. So these are some articles about Microsoft and about Fujitsu, and these are like very technologically driven companies. And what we have here, like we have the Facebooks of the world and the Googles of the world. And for these companies, working remotely makes a lot of sense. They've already published policies to say that their employees are not going to come back before June of next year, 2021, or even that they're going to be working from anywhere for the longest time. But for them, like even before the pandemic, they were kind of experimenting with these types of flexible work policies. But on the next slide, what I wanted to do is to find an example of a company that's a food multinational company. So it's a manufacturer of snacks and foods, and it's an international company, but it has a center in Singapore as well. And for them, just like everyone else, and you may have heard of their concept and how they're thinking about it, they had to move their staff into a work from home situation since March. But then, of course, because some of their employees are directly involved in the production processes, in the manufacturing production lines, they weren't able to do this with their entire team. So what they did, they kind of found like a hybrid way. Some employees, which is what my company is doing as well, because we're producing oncology drugs and other types of drugs. So we have part of the employees present in the physical location, but then most of the employees are working from home. And as you can see here with a quote from their CEO saying that probably long-term, as they're looking at real estate and offices, they're probably not going to be needing all of the offices and the locations that they have right now. So this again speaks to that need for adaptation and change. And that's not going to look the same for each one of us, depending on your industry, depending on your geography, and depending on your type of business. It's going to look different for each one of us. But what I wanted to leave you with is some things that we can do right now. And a lot of the work is going to have to happen at the company level and at the team level, and just like understanding what works for your particular situation. But I have some ideas. If we move to the next slide here. So just like to get you to think in terms of where do we begin, 4 things that are going to be important. They're important right now in a work from home scenario, either 100% or a hybrid work scenario, and they're going to continue to be important as we transition towards more flexible work environments. The first one is building a community of trust within your team, within your company. The second one is enhancing virtual communication through all of these amazing platforms that we have at our fingertips right now. The third one is supporting the employee well-being. So as I mentioned before, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's gonna continue like this for a while. So in the process, we need to pay a lot of attention in terms of employee well-being. And then the fourth one is developing a collaborative environment. Of course, the virtual environment is not as natural as a face-to-face environment. However, how do we continue to be collaborative? How do we continue to deliver high quality work? And now in the following slides, for the few minutes that I have left, I'm gonna go through each one of these questions, and I'm gonna go one level deeper just to give you some ideas of how you may potentially address each one of them. So the first one, how do we nurture a community of trust? Each one of us this was a requirement before as well in a face-to-face environment, but now we have to adapt with more virtual environments. So now some ideas would be, instead of happy hour like we had before, now we can have a virtual happy hour. Instead of seeing each other day in and day out, maybe that's not possible anymore, but we could still organize organize an offsite. Maybe not now with the pandemic, depending on where you live in the world. Maybe that's not allowed. It's not allowed here in San Francisco. I haven't seen my my coworkers since March. But once that's going to become a possibility, just organizing some offsites, maybe once every 6 months, once a year, just bringing everyone together, that's still very, very beneficial for building that community of trust. And then just allocating a little bit more time for personal updates is very easy, especially in a virtual environment, to just jump straight into business discussions and just be very focused on that and what we need to deliver. But also the personal updates, it just brings people closer, and it's even more important in this environment. On the next slide, how do we enhance communication and feedback loops? So what you see here in my first bullet point there is kind of a continuum of what's like the most effective communication style. Of course, that's the in-person communication. And then it kind of goes from video to audio to written communication, which in our case, written communication is usually an email. But as you can see here, probably of all different channels and forms of communication, the email is probably the one that's least effective, and it's really difficult to transmit a certain idea, and it could also be misinterpreted. So that's why maybe we don't have the luxury to be in person anymore, but we could leverage video, we could leverage audio, and all the platforms. I'm sure depending on your physical location, you may be using different platforms. But I think us as a society, we've made a lot of progress in terms of these type of things. And also, even in a virtual environment, spending the time to give and receive continuous feedback with your manager, with your employee, with your peers, it's really, really important. The third thing that I wanted to talk here, another idea of what you could be doing on the following slide, is what I mentioned before. How do we maintain the well-being of our employees? And here, I think maybe San Francisco is a little bit extreme in terms of what we're doing for our employees here, but we have all sorts of things. Like, we have meditation sessions, we have yoga classes that are paid for by our companies. We have virtual coaches that are really, really interesting, virtual coaches that can advise you on how to deliver a virtual presentation or how to lead a virtual team. All of these different topics that maybe they've always been interesting, but now we don't have an option. We need to adapt. We need to grow in that respect. So whatever works for your company, there are like a multitude of options here, but I can tell you that myself and my colleagues, we really enjoy and we really appreciate the focus on the mental well-being as well through these difficult times. And then the fourth and last topic on the following slide here, how do we continue to be collaborative? How do we continue to deliver high quality work? And I know for many of us, especially for the managers in the room, this is extremely important, because in terms of business objectives, milestones, deliverables, we still have stuff that we need to deliver, right? They're not going anywhere. But I think it's really important for each one of us to understand that maybe because we're going through this transition, because we're going through this transformation, maybe the expectations need to be adjusted as well in terms of how do we report, how do we track performance, what are realistic milestones. Maybe an option would be to just make a conscious decision to focus more on high impact, whatever we deem as high priority initiatives rather than everything, and just acknowledging that we may not have the same level of productivity working in this kind of remote virtual scenario. But whatever is the right solution for you is going to be achieved with a lot of communication within the team, with regular and more frequent check-ins, and even over communicating. So I can't emphasize that enough. And now I think I only have one more slide to leave you with. So as I mentioned, these are just some ideas, and I'm really happy that you guys are going to have access to these slides and the recording, because I know it's a lot of information in 15 minutes. But what I want to leave you with is, as I mentioned, the right solution is going to be very specific to your situation and your company. So it's really important for each one of us to plan and to structure this transition on a company and team and maybe even individual level. So this is just a framework that I wanted to introduce, and many of you may already be, it's very simple, you may be familiar with this, but it's basically structuring your activities and initiatives into 3 different columns. What are things that I want to start doing that I wasn't doing before in a face-to-face environment? In 2019, I wasn't doing, but now, given all the changes, I think I need to start doing these things. Whether it's setting aside time for personal updates, like we said, or organizing virtual happy hours, maybe developing remote communication trainings, or working more on that mental health support services. So these could all be things that we want to start now. Then there are things that we used to do before, but it doesn't make sense for us to continue doing them. So we have that in the stop category. And these are things like, for example, for me, I remember we used to have sessions, meetings that would be maybe like 4, 5, 6 hours. Sometimes we would have like an all day meeting face to face, but that's, we need to be realistic. In a work from home virtual scenario, that's not feasible anymore. You can't keep people in front of their computers for 6 hours at a time. So we need to stop that, and we need to replace it with something else. And then also, as we said, stop relying mostly on written communication. That's probably not the best way. It's not the best communication channel right now, and it needs to be replaced with others. And then finally, things that we used to do before, and it still makes sense for us to continue doing them. For example, encouraging travel to headquarters on a regular basis. Again, it may not be possible depending on where you are in the world right now, but just like for the future, it's still important to, even if we're dispersed, decentralized everywhere in the world or in a country, it's still important to bring people together once in a while to create that personal connection. Also along the lines of the same, continue expanding into new forms of communication, including video. I know different, like even not only different organizations, but even within the same organization, different teams have different experiences with these new forms of communication. Some of them may be more comfortable being on camera all the time. Some others may not be. So there is a degree of flexibility there, and we need to see what works for each one of us. And then continue, another example here would be to plan the kickoffs, the milestones, the interim reviews through a lot of communication. But that's my departing thought for now for you. Just try to internalize everything that's going on, and try to also structure by using a very simple framework like the start, stop, continue, and see there are like a ton of things that we could potentially be doing right now, but try to prioritize and start somewhere towards this transition.
Daria, there's a wealth of substantive insights from your presentation. I like, community of trust, enhancing communication, well-being, collaboration, and productivity. It's like a really solid kind of, these kind of tasks and strategies to tackle. So I'd like now to kind of transition to Alex's presentation. He is going to be talking about work from home trends pre and post COVID. I also understand that he will be using his own organization as a case. So just, I'm sure he will talk about this, but he's working in 3 different cities, 3 different countries, the US, Korea, and also Thailand, in the areas of consulting and investment. So Alex, looking forward to hearing your insights.
Great, thanks, John, and thanks, Daria, for opening up. I actually think we're going to build on a lot of what you said. We're going to approach it from, of course, from the consulting perspective, supporting clients, and from our own interaction, our own experiences. So hopefully that'll provide another opportunity to kind of come from a different perspective. So just wanted to open up by talking about where we were before and where we are now and how we got here and how that fits in this continuum of work. Particularly in the 20th century, everything was about, from a company perspective, about location, location, location. It was a traditional business model of being where your clients are, having the face-to-face interactions, and being on site. Now, over the past decade, we've seen the rise of co-working in flexible spaces with this move to location and flexibility as the main drivers. So when you talk about WeWork, Impact Hub, places like this, these are places that became not only popular for startups, but the same concepts became popular for large organizations that were increasing headcount, but didn't have the flexibility to increase their space. So that talking about hoteling and having people come into locations to work on an as-needed basis or not without not having assigned seats. So those are some of the things that had happened beforehand. Now, due to COVID and a little bit before COVID and where we're going now, especially with technology being a main driver of businesses, we're looking at this new concept of location, analytics, and experience. And so that involves two things, one of which is fusing together workplace and personal space. The opportunity, and you've already heard of this in terms of people living where they work or close to their jobs, but almost taking that to another level of being able to leverage your space most efficiently and effectively for your personal needs and your work needs. And then companies leveraging technology as a way to utilize those physical assets to make sure that they're being utilized and that they're getting a return on those assets, as well as those digital assets. So real property, as well as the technology platforms that are being implemented across different organizations. And then the second part of that is experiential job design. So how we work is a question that is being asked by companies, especially now, because COVID has forced a lot of us offline. But crafting roles to be effective and to make sure that they remain effective, that people are able to continue to drive towards those strategic goals is a key component of that. And there's a lot more thought that goes into that now that we've gone remote and now that we're looking at how does working remotely craft into brand as well as a strategy that a company articulates. Next slide, please. So I'd like to give an example of two companies we worked with just to highlight them as examples of companies that operate in Asian culture, particularly in Korea in this case, and in the US. So, and we're just using three designs, and this is just kind of a high level example. But in terms of looking at how they look at work is one of the things. So Company K looks at evaluates their employees, particularly by the hours that they work in the office. That contributes to how determined and how motivated they are. The achievement structure is primarily team-based. For anyone who's been to Korea or are familiar with it, and it's not just to Korea, there's a concept of waeshiks, which is going out after work with your team, and that's not a happy hour. It's almost a mandated extension of work to have that continuous discussion between a manager, a director, or VP with their team. And then the power dynamics and influence is making sure that that team is physically close to you and has those connections to make sure that progress is being made. Now, I want to contrast that to a multinational conglomerate on the US side, Representative West. So one of those metrics, instead of hours on site, is milestones. What did you achieve? The achievement structure is still team-based, but you're distinguishing individual accomplishment. So if you think about a resume, you're highlighting what you've done and what you've done to what you can bring to the table. And no one's suggesting or even believes that you did that by yourself, but it's more so the concept of an individualistic component of that whole team element. And then the last component of that differentiation is the influence and power dynamics of the organizational structure, is that you can have a manager be based somewhere in New Jersey or London, and then have a team that's working for them in New York or Chicago or LA or somewhere else, right? So those are kind of the things that happen. Now, in the difference between these two is that remote work existed in some capacity in the US already. It wasn't a foregone conclusion or unheard of concept, but wasn't accepted at all almost pre-COVID in Korean culture. And so that evaluation and achievement draw a distinction between the attitudes from work from home and how it's going to be perceived, right? If we're evaluating people on milestones, then those milestones will take place theoretically, depending on the role, of course, in the business, will take place no matter where you are, as long as you're in a position to actually achieve those objectives. So that's definitely moved the US into a bigger projection than Korea. And for Korea, it's a little different because with COVID, physical proximity was not even an option for many people anymore. So it removed that barrier and basically instilled a requirement to have some instance of working remotely in order to continue operations and to still be effective. So the prevalence of COVID has definitely shifted both into a different direction of working from home, but to different extents. And we will likely see that after COVID's done. Next slide, please. So here I want to talk about how work from home is an opportunity for companies to redesign an organizational strategy, their culture and their business strategy. This is coming from a position working on a number of different organizational management projects, personally and as an organization, as we have an organizational management company as a portfolio firm. And some of the concepts that companies have, particularly from an HR perspective and an organizational perspective, is rewarding talent, making sure that performers are the top performers who are overwhelmingly contributing to the top line and growth of organizations, but they're also most likely to transition because they're not necessarily having a tie to stay with the company and feeling rewarded there. The second is managing profit. And this is particularly important for public sector companies that are driven by markets, that in order to be profitable, you have to look at all costs. And unfortunately, personnel sometimes is included in that. And so cutting staff can be a cost saver, but it also can be detrimental to performance and have an impact on overall growth. And lastly is lost productivity. So when you lose people, either from either one of these functions, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to fill that productivity gap between the vacancy and lost productivity, search and finding someone, and then the learning curve for getting someone else up to speed in order to fulfill that lost personnel and that lost capability. Now, there are some things that work from home specifically can do to remedy some of these. Now, the first thing is revising the culture. Implementing that can be a way and a reward effectively of flexibility and entrusting autonomy among teammates and employees so that they have a premium on the flexibility to do what they need to do personally and professionally and still contribute to the growth of the company. So it's going to be an added benefit. Secondly is reducing the overhead costs. So now that we talked about this a little bit earlier in the previous slide about the questioning whether or not we need office space or how much office space we need, this work from home shifts companies to more of an office on demand model, which means, which effectively is hoteling or going in when you need it with a client engagement. Sometimes the personal interaction is necessary. So having that as an asset can be effective, but not necessarily a mandate. And so that also can reduce costs on the corporate side. And then the third is virtual connectivity and productivity. So based on a survey we had done a few months ago, we realized that 2/3 of workers feel like their productivity has increased since work from home. And that contributes to not necessarily having a lot of distractions that the office provides as well. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone needs to work from home all the time. And I think Daria was talking about this earlier. It could be effective, a hybrid model, because people still want to have the office opportunity to go into the office, to connect with people, to have the access to those assets that you won't have at home. But there's just an opportunity to say that having that hybrid is a way that you can keep people engaged, keep them productive, and still reach the goals of the organization. Next. So I want to talk a little bit about our company and how we have approached this situation, just to give you a personal perspective. Not to say it's a gold standard by any means, because everyone is trying to address this as they see fit. But as John had alluded to earlier, so our primary business, we directly invest in companies in growing recurring revenue companies, and the main part is consulting for a number of organizations, both private and public sector, in finance, operations, and technology. And we're doing that across with offices in 3 countries, 20 employees, and projects that were ongoing in 5 countries. Now, back when COVID first emerged, it was in January, particularly it hit Korea, where we had a super spreader event in country. And immediately when that happened, out of concern of how quickly it would spread, we immediately went to a work from home. Everyone would work remotely, both in Thailand as well as in Korea, out of those offices, and people who were working on site in the Philippines as well. Now, we did move also to work from home in the US in February, just because of our concern about what would be happening and how fast it would project. So we were a little bit faster to do this than most companies. And the reason for that is, one, because we're smaller, we are able to be more nimble, and we have that flexibility in place. But because we work with other companies, it required not only making sure that our protocols were aligned, that we understood how we were going to communicate, the cadence in which we would do so. It also meant that we need to be very clear and crystal clear with our clients in terms of, and our portfolio firms, to make sure that they understood that we were still going to be there for them, and that we were going to be able to communicate in a different way. So it's going to be a new normal. Now, as a result of this, we are now 8 months later in August. We still were able to close 2 deals, which is pretty active for us. We're not a very large entity. And then we're executing those long-term consulting projects across borders, still with the constant communication, with ways to communicate both online and offline to be successful and continue that productivity. Next. So what I want to leave you here with is that, yes, about what lessons we come out with from COVID, and particularly about the continuity of operations, or what we call COOP planning. Now, COVID happened, and it's one example of a lot of different threats that can occur to a business, and making sure that you have a game plan and some contingencies in place, regardless of what it is very important. And so I listed a few of those here as well. So we're talking about biological, cyber attacks here in the 21st century as they become more pertinent, and security is more necessary. Natural disasters, which are affecting Adaria in the Bay Area right now, as an example, are very key. Political unrest and specific value chain disruptions that can be specific to your business, whether or not it's suppliers or your own facility that gets taken offline in a way that was not expected. All of which comes back to the point of having a plan of how do you keep the people engaged, what are going to be their roles, the processes that you follow, and the technology that you leverage in order to make sure that you're able to continue operating despite these challenges. So some of the high-level components of this, just put on here on the right and touch on quickly. Do you have, when you think about the people in the organization, across your team, and the connection between divisions, is there a RACI matrix for each function? And that means who's responsible, who's accountable, consulted, and informed about all of those decisions, and who's going to be the owners of those. In the process and governance, what is the protocol? What happens when something goes down between one of these different situations, and what actions do you take? And who's empowered to make decisions in those cases when you can't communicate with leadership, and at what extent? What is going to be those protocols, and how does that work? And lastly, technology. Just recently, I think earlier this week, Zoom went down across the board. I don't know if anybody else had that situation, but a lot of people couldn't communicate anymore, at least the way that they had planned to. So if that happens, what's going to be the backup? Do you have a way to communicate securely that's encrypted, that you have your communications transmitted, and to still have that productivity? So these are just things that COVID has provided us the opportunity to think more broadly about how do we can remain operationally resilient, and what we've been helping clients think about. Back to you, John.
Okay, Alex, thank you so much for sharing your own case, and also the COOP planning, people, processing, governance, and technology, and just sharing with us those kind of criteria in order to address those. Well, we actually have several questions already. So I'd like to actually bring on Hui Su Ong. Okay, he has a very interesting question. I think it's a question that is on a lot of people's minds these days about personal time and work company time. Can we put Hui Su Ong on the line? Okay, as we wait for Hui Su Ong, I'd just like everyone to submit their questions in the Q&A box. And if there's a question that resonates with you, please feel free to upvote it. And then those will be the ones addressed in a democratic way. So Hui Su Ong, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
So please introduce yourself and share your question.
Yeah, I'm Hui Su, and I'm resident in Petaling Jaya, Malaysia, satellite town of KL. So, I have my children working from home now, 2 of them. And sometimes there's blurring of lines, you got family responsibilities. You have, from other families, not mine, but like say they have to take care of kids halfway, doing some job, the baby cries or whatever, and sometimes meal times also you skip because you have to meet some deadlines. So when you miss your meal time, and how do you okay, productivity, I guess the most important KPI, but then still of time management, you still sometimes can't, it's a blurring of lines, like you lose sleep and all that kind of thing, and because you have to meet deadline, so somehow the border is not very clearly defined. And, is the KPI productivity is the most important KPI. What about other things like just now someone brought out, it's very important, speaker, I think the Daria, about the well-being of the staff, the employee at home. Working at home doesn't mean that, he's much better off, but sometimes because of this extended hours of working, the stress and all that, the well-being is not really taken care of because of this blurring of line. I hope you get what I mean.
Yeah. Hui Su, yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So maybe Alex or Daria, feel free to address it.
Sure.
How do you demarcate the borders?
Yeah, so I think we're definitely experiencing that, right? Like what you described, the children crying in the background or the dog barking. And I think that's not going away, at least here now. A lot of the children, the schools are not reopening. So the children need to continue homeschooling and all of that stuff. So I think it's really, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's really difficult to have a very split kind of, this is my professional life, this is my personal life. And I think from our perspective, like if you're a manager or a leader in your company, I think it's really important to come to terms with the fact that this is how it's going to be. The lines are going to continue to be blurred, and we just need to be more flexible. And now in terms of performance and productivity that you discussed about, I think that's also where we need to adjust expectations. I think Alex, in his slide, he had the side-by-side comparison of how do we quantify productivity? Is it number of hours worked, or is it milestones or something else? I think you should definitely steer clear away from the volume type of metrics, like number of hours worked, the emails per day sent, like that kind of stuff, and just trying to focus on the outcomes. I mean, the fact that the lines are blurred becomes less important if I'm still able to deliver my work. But then also with the outcomes, there's a need to adjust those as well. I think as managers and leaders of our companies, I think it's not realistic to be asking for the same kind of output, the same kind of productivity in this environment. So then as an organization, you need to go through your list of stuff that needs to be done and you need to go through a prioritization exercise and decide together with your teams what's high priority, what do we really need to focus on, what's high priority, what's going to be really high impact for our business, and then kind of let go of the rest of the activities that before we made a conscious decision to do them, but now in the new environment, it's probably not that realistic to continue to do them. So I don't have a good answer for that. I think the answer is that we need to adjust and accept the new reality that's going to be different.
Alex, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I think that's definitely true. And one other thing I'll say is that there has to be an acceptance from leadership and from our teams to understand the situation. But at the same time, as an individual who's working, you also have to set almost guidelines yourself in terms of your time and your flexibility and how you segment, which can be segmenting your home space to where you go work, and then telling your kids or telling someone else in your home that say, hey, when I'm in here, this is when I'm working. I'll come back out, between 2 and 4 p.m., which would still normally be during work times, but you don't have a meeting, so you're able to spend some time with kids, and things that you would have normally gotten done during the workday, you'll push off a little bit later until after dinner, and it won't have an impact on the actual operations and what's needed to be accomplished. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one thing. And I'll say one other thing too, is that I think a lot of people, especially in white collar jobs, have felt this way probably before, because depending on your role. So, and I'll give you an example. Several years ago, one of my roles was as a consultant. I had a BlackBerry, if that doesn't date me a little bit in terms of when this happened, but a BlackBerry for work. And there would be messages and calls that would come in all times of the day and night. And there was an expectation that you were going to respond to it. So at least within a time, even if it was off hours. And so there are a lot of people who had that before COVID. Now with it being in place, again, it's still a line that you have to segment with your personal responsibility about when you're responding to messages and making sure that that's clear, something that fits your lifestyle, and at the same time fits that of your team and your colleagues and the overall goals that you're accomplishing over a specific period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is how, intentionally designing and engineering your life. I have one friend who had actually a personal space for him and his wife, and the kids knew not to actually go in that area and then I don't know if maybe not everyone has the luxury to do that, but I think it's like intentionally designing certain principles and having even those family talks. Okay, so we have a next question from Gene Banta. Can we put him on the line? Okay. If we can't put Gene on the line, I can perhaps relay his question.
Okay.
Oh, Gene, are you there? Hi.
Yeah,
just introduce yourself and share your question.
Hi, I'm Jean, and I'm from Manila. Mm. My question is in relation to the first presentation, particularly of Daria. And thank you, Daria. That was a very nice presentation. This is particularly about maintaining the well-being of the employees. I would just like to know or ask for data on what sorts of mental health conditions have been common in the workplace in this pandemic situation.
Yeah, I think, so I don't have specific numbers, but what I've seen around me and what I've read about is the usual may occur when you spend so many hours in front of your computer and with the pressure to have your video camera on for most of the time. It's just most of it is related to burnout and to what someone else said before, like the blurring of the lines. You don't know what's professional, what's personal anymore. You don't know what's like when you're supposed to stop working and start your like family life, even the weekends, like every day comes after another, one day after another, the week week after week after week. So it has to do with burnout. It has to do with depression, and just like this social distancing. I was actually talking to one of my friends who's a graduate of the Harvard School of Public Health, and she was telling me that from a public health perspective, there's a period of time, maybe like 2-3 months, that we as humans, we can kind of do the social distancing stuff, but you can't continue that for 6 months, for a year. People need human connection. They need to come together, and it's great that we have all these virtual platforms, but that's probably, it's not a great substitute for person to person kind of communication. Yeah, so I would say a lot of the stuff that meditation, yoga, that's why I was referring to those kind of activities. I think those would help.
So we have a next question from Doreen Sim. Can we put Doreen on the line?
Hello.
Hi, Doreen.
Hello.
Hi, just introduce yourself and share your question.
Oh, hi. So this is Doreen from Singapore. I guess right now for me, my personal experience has been, it's, the usual conversations that we have, the water cooler talks, the informal chit chat. It's kind of awkward to have those conversations virtually over, Skype or Teams or Zoom. So personally for me, it's easy to go back to talking about work related topics because those are tangible, measurable. So it's easy to have the conversation. But I'm also realizing that we are slowly but surely moving away from having like informal conversations, which I think is important to maintain the relationship. So any suggestions on how we can overcome the awkwardness?
Yeah, maybe I can take this one because I feel like my team at work, we're doing a lot of this. And I think it's definitely awkward in the beginning. It's not something that you would usually do easily. And then I was probably one of the people who was wondering, like, why do we need to do this? And especially now in a virtual environment, because we have our weekly check-in with the entire team is on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. And I was like, this is my most productive time. I want to talk about business. It's my morning time. I want to focus on business. Why do we need to spend, I think of a meeting of 90 minutes, we spend maybe 20, 25 in the beginning, just talking about personal updates. But I must say that with time, I can definitely see the benefit. And you can start, so some suggestions here, it depends what's going to work for you, but you can start really small. So for us, we just said, let's do a roundabout because our meeting is on Tuesday. We just talk about, we share something that we did over the weekend with our spouses or with our children, and we just give like a personal update that way. Then another thing that we have a WhatsApp group or like a text message group and we keep in touch, and not only on business related stuff, but we share articles, we share like shopping lists, we even shared like recipes for cooking. So any like small things, they may sound silly in the beginning, but if you keep doing it on a regular basis, then you will start seeing the benefits of it.
Alex, did you want to add anything to that, or?
No, that's good. I think she nailed it, though, so thanks.
Okay. All right. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to get 2 questions at a time. So, Angela, maybe we can put you on the line, and then after that, Sophie, if you can get ready to ask your question as well. So let's put Angela on the line. You can just introduce yourself and share your question.
All right. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Angela.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentations. I'm just really interested to know if in any of your experiences, how is talent development being pursued right now? Since we know that much of the attention is obviously on operations and just how we can navigate in this new normal. But how is talent development being pursued?
Okay. So Angela, her question is on talent development vis-a-vis the attention focused on operations. Can we put Sophie on the line?
Hi, this is Sophie from Korea. So my question is, for companies adopting work from home as culture and focusing more about employees' individual milestones, and we're considering having unlimited vacation or annual leave and not tracking the annual leave of our employees. But I think this concept is quite new. So is there any case you can share on this, and what are the risks of having this as our policy? So this is my question.
It's I think it's the Netflix model of, right. Okay, so go ahead, Alex, Daria, you have two questions for you, and then we'll try to get two more after this.
Yeah, so just going on the first part of the concept, effectively it's being planned a little bit better. So at some points you could do it immediately, but I think now with operations being so pertinent, in order to have the talent development component, one, it has to be moved virtually, and that comes either in the form of planning and usually being outsourced to a company that specializes in doing the talent development and carving out a day or two for people who are supposed to be slotted for that to actually engage in it. So it's not something that would happen at a, on an all hands now, or like I should say on a short period of time. It's something to say that you'll know this happening in 3-4 weeks, even a month later, to say that these are some of the action items that we want you to develop, either based on what we've been talking about or based on what you had before moving to this environment. Now we're going to set this up so that you can have that opportunity to develop and grow that way. So just to answer, is more planned. It needs to take place more in advance in order to have that fit into the schedule. Mm-hmm. On Sophie's part, I'll touch base on that one really quickly. The work, the free model in terms of free vacation, it's been something that's been, usually studies show that like the companies that have this, people don't usually use it or abuse it. Those who do end up probably getting fired because there's not a lot of productivity coming out of it, oddly enough. But it is a bigger transition, especially in the Korean market, in the consideration that it's been very limited in terms of leave to 10 days or what have you, or 15, depending on what it is. And so it is a concept, but based on setting the expectations, it's worked with Netflix. It's done with some other contracting companies. Another company called L3 comes to mind that has unlimited vacation, but yet they're still doing a number of different contracts and very successful, growing market cap. So it's been there. Those are two examples I can highlight really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Aria, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think Alex was spot on. From my experience, I heard the same, that actually the organizations that are doing this, their employees end up not taking much vacation at all. And it probably has to do with the way they are evaluated based on outcomes and productivity. So I think you can assess them on the outcomes of their work without having to worry about but of course, keeping an eye on that as well.
Yeah. Okay, so right now we have two more individuals, Ling Wu. Can we put Ling on the line? And then can we also get Josephine? Josephine, just be ready after Ling. So Ling, just share your question. Introduce yourself and share your question.
Okay, hi, I'm Ling here. I'm actually from a school context here in education line. So my question is, in view of the current working culture and the changes over time, like what's happening now with people working virtually, what can youth do today to prepare when they enter the workforce in the next 5 years, and how can parents and organizations and the government guide them?
Okay, thanks for the question, Ling. Can we have Josephine? Josephine, I know you have two questions here. Maybe you can kind of compress them.
Hi.
Hi, Josephine. Just introduce yourself and share your question.
Yeah, I'm Josephine from Vietnam. I'm working in a stock moving company. So my question is, because in Vietnam, it's always got this problem of staff taking two jobs at the same time. So if we are implementing this kind of concept of working from home, and when there's no superior of supervising, how can we know that to ensure the staff is actually dedicated for the work, taking another job while working from home? And I find that today's conversation, I mean, the training is good. I was thinking that if really my company wants to be working from home, then how to pay those people who's working from home than those people who's working in the office? Is it paying them the same salary or different? So I really need the expert to advise. Thank you.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on this, guys? Of course, Josephine's operating, of course, in the Vietnamese context. So there might be cultural differences, but just you can share your thoughts on Josephine's and also Ziling's question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say that for the first question, that's actually my other chapter that I wrote in the Rethinking Asia book, and I would encourage you to check it out. It's not the one that I talked about today, but it's really about the new generation of youth and how do we manage they continue to have a successful career in a new environment. And I think, yes, like the environment has changed and is changing. It's not going to be like our parents and our parents' parents that were spending maybe 30, 40 years, their entire career with one company that they were taking care of. They were retiring for that company. That's not the case anymore. The work environment is much more dynamic. However, there are some skills, some competencies that are going to be relevant no matter what. So I think our children, our youth, like we need to encourage them to develop those kind of competencies, and very quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but one is like technical expertise, being an expert in their field, in their industry, either functional or industrial expertise. The other one is strategic agility, like knowing how to navigate the environment, having this ability to see the big picture, to connect the dots, to think strategically. And then leadership, of course, leadership, but not only formal leadership, like it's more like a mindset, any type of leadership, being a leader of people, of teams, and then collaboration. And yeah, I'll be happy to discuss more about that. I feel like I just summarized an entire chapter in 1 minute. And then Josephine, I'm gonna very quickly give you my opinion on the two questions that you asked here. So I don't think you can make sure that they don't have a second job. I mean, I don't think there's a good way to know that. But I think, again, if you focus on outcomes, because after all, like if you're a manager or a company, what you really care about, and Alex here, who's running his own company, like what you really care about as a business owner and as a manager is for that person to be productive and to do their job. So as long as they do their job, they may have a second job, but like, would you mind that? Would you really mind that? So I would focus on the outcomes and what they need to achieve. And then the following one with paying less, I think that is a way, like if they would fall under that category of getting paid less, I think that is actually linked to your previous question, because if you're a household, then you have your expenses and you need to feed your children and like support your spouse and all of that, and then all of a sudden you get paid less, then you may be in a situation where you need to take a second job. So I would say again, like as long as that person delivers, as long as their outcomes are still good quality, I wouldn't see a reason to cut pay for that. And I think there are other ways to reduce costs. We know that the businesses are going through a very difficult time, but for example, like the office space, that's a huge expense that you may be able to reduce in other ways. And I know Alex also had some very good ideas around that.
Alex, any thoughts?
Yeah, really quickly, I'll because everything Daria said, but the one thing about fairness is it's a hard question to ask about being fair, but more specifically is that unless there's something that like a role where there's always more things to do, there's always something and someone who's strategically driving the business forward, where like any extra time that they have when they complete a task, you want them to be driving something forward, that's a point where you could say that you have to have, you want to see more of a case to have them in an office than be remote. But everything that Daria said, as long as you're focused on outcomes and outputs instead of the process and making sure that they're dedicated to you, you should be fine either way. You'll get what you need out of the business, out of the person, and then you'll still be able to hit your targets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot, especially if it's collaborative or strategic work versus like more like operational with like very defined outputs. So yeah, I mean, that's I think a good distinction. Okay, so unfortunately, we're actually a few minutes over time, but just before you guys go, I want to share a couple updates. So next week, we will continue our webinar series. Actually, this is about 2 weeks from now, with leadership development in the new normal, strategies to create a future-ready workforce with Nupur Todi, who is a leadership development consultant and facilitator. She will share practical strategies for future-proofing your organization through leadership development. If you are interested, our next slide, if you are interested in bringing a program to your organization, we do offer these suite of programs on adaptive leadership, on futures thinking, becoming a professional thinker, developing strategic foresight, persuasion, power, and influence, also negotiation skills as well. If you are interested in books that we have researched and published and developed, the Rethinking Asia series and also the Asia Leadership Institute series are available at asialeadership.org/publications. So the most recent one, of course, Daria is an author of 2 chapters. Alex, we're gonna try to recruit you. Maybe you can join our club in the future as well. So I would also like to, I'm very pleased to also remind you guys of our upcoming third Asia Leadership Forum online, originally scheduled in May, of course, now postponed to November 16th to 21. But nevertheless, we're very happy to do this just because we can reach a broader range of audiences across the region. The theme is the world after COVID, how to lead adaptively beyond the crisis. How do you reinvent yourself to lead beyond the crisis? And we have different themes. It's Monday to Friday. There will be 2 speakers each day, and then there will be live roundtable discussions with these speakers and also with local practitioners across the region. We really want you guys to benefit from this conference. It's very affordable, and there's even an early bird discount until September 30. We're going to be covering futures thinking, how societies have overcome crises in the past, on adaptive leadership and futures thinking, embedding innovation into your organization, strategic influence during crises, and also self-leadership during crucible experiences. So please do check that out. You can visit alf.asialeadership.org. And finally, just do connect, our next slide, please. Just do connect with us. So you can visit Daria's and Alex's LinkedIn profiles. They're always posting interesting content. They also have their Twitter handles here. And of course, ours at our center as well at asialeadership.org. We also have our social media handles here as well. And I would also, of course, like to thank our partner Links. If you are part of the Links network, we welcome you, and we hope to continue working with Links on some of this interesting content, these interesting webinars. We really do hope. I mean, we share, I believe, a mission with Links to really help, encourage and educate during these tough times, these tough, uncertain times. So lastly, if you could fill out the exit survey that will pop up when you leave, that will really provide us with very valuable feedback to continue to improve our webinars moving forward. So lastly, just thank you for your time today. We hope you have, wherever you are in the world, we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. If you're on the other side, we hope that you have a nice rest, stay safe, and fight the good fight of making our organizations and our communities fairer, more prosperous, safer, and with more just societies as well. So with that, thank you so much, and we hope to see you again next time. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Daria.
Thank you.